Chapter 207 to 209. Once again outside of Bulma's safe barrier. Cell still believed himself to be the king of all creation. Scared? Don't worry, I won't move or attack for a minute. It would be unfair not to give you some small advantage, said Cell, proposing one of his narcissistic games in which he put himself at an absolute disadvantage to try to prove to himself that he was the best. Game that at the same time insulted the pride of its rivals. A game that achieved that goal in the proud minds of the two pure Saiyans. However, at the same time they were also excited about the idea. Yes. And we know about arrogance too, Vegeta said, doing some self-criticism. And then Yam charged against Cell at an almost imperceptible speed to those who were both inside and outside the capsule. Fii-yu-yu-yu. Except for Cell and Piccolo. Slash. Plas. Flow. Slash. Slash. Plash. You have become faster. But not enough, Cell said as he dodged each of the attacks that were directed towards him without moving the fixed point in the sky from which he had announced not to move. Just by contorting his head, body and making small twists he was being able to evade all of Yam's precise and violent attack. Yam had become much faster by transforming into Super Saiyan 2, however Cell was even faster. This was frustrating, but her onslaught didn't seem to have any results. And even if she hit him, it could hardly hurt him. If she could barely hurt him with the Super Saiyan X500, she would hardly be able to with the X100, without sacrificing speed. Hence. HaHaHa. She changed her strategy, and instead of trying to hit him at a vital point precisely, she went to grab. A tactic with more precision, but that normally didn't have many results with someone much taller, heavier and stronger than you. Good idea, but you aren't strong enough to strangle me and neither to immobilize me, Cell said calmly and arrogantly as Yam grabbed him from behind with her legs and tried to strangle him with her arms. Yes, she was trying to strangle someone who can live in the space without breathing. And at the same time. HaHaHa. Super Saiyan Vegeta advanced at high speed frontally towards Cell. And at the last moment and still in the race. Vegeta increased his bodybuilding, transforming into Super Saiyan X500. In this way he could preserve his running speed and at the same time the greatest attack power ever to hit with the most powerful punch he had ever struck in his life in the disgusting face of the most disgusting being, with Frieza's permission, he had ever faced. Palmamum. And unfortunately that punch had no effect whatsoever. You can't even make me feel pain. If this is all you have, I have to tell you that you have disappointed me. This can't even be considered a warm-up. You can't even make me feel pain. If this is all you have, I have to tell you that you have disappointed me. This can't even be considered a warm-up. You may not know it, but failing my expectations is something that is punishable by death, Cell said calmly, still gripped by Yam and with Vegeta's fist still embedded in his cheek. They had used everything they had, even a power-up. But they hadn't even been able to make him bleed or truly immobilize him. From Cell's point of view, this performance, although well maneuvered, had been pathetic. He hadn't been able to show off the way he had planned. Although on the other hand, he was also very happy. He had proven that he was invincible, that no one, not even attacking in a group, could be defeated. His goal had been accomplished. And now he just had to get rid of those annoyances in the most cruel and imaginative way possible. Once he finished his own game, he would torture them, both physically and psychologically. He would bend the enormous pride of those two conceited ones to dust. And once they begged him for mercy, with faces full of fear and his body in submission, he would destroy them. Death? HaHaHa. Do you think that scars me? Yam yelled with contempt and arrogance as she strangled Cell stronger than before. And at the same time that Cell didn't understand Yam's attitude, Vegeta perfectly understood what Cell was thinking. HaHaHa. You are more of an idiot than you think, Cell. Did you really think we were going to get out of this alive? They mean that, Cell thought, who seemed to have understood the subtext behind Vegeta and Yam's words. It hasn't been a minute yet, Cell, Vegeta said as he pressed his fist against his face with more strength than before as he stared into his eyes. With eyes full of determination and regret. See you in hell. Yam yelled as she muscled her body, which began to glow with an unusual golden color. Like Vegeta. Both of them were shining like a miniature sun glued to Cell's body. Oh no. Trunks yelled upon see what was happening and what Yam and Vegeta were trying to do. Like Cell, shit. Vegeta and Yam. Bibu. They had turned their bodies into bombs with Cell right in the middle of both, thus creating the ultimate bomb that contained the power of 2 Super Saiyan X500. An explosion of highly concentrated energy that created an expansive wave that affected the entire planet and even the space debris that flew through the atmosphere. An explosion that made a fool of all the previous ones registered. An explosion that only 4 people had the opportunity to see live and that collaterally killed millions of poor humans and furries who were several hundred kilometers around. We will always remind you of collateral damage, chance. I thought for a moment that the barrier wouldn't withstand that explosion. Even if it was physically impossible, said Bulma, who despite knowing that her barrier was suicide bomber proof, panic seized her for a moment. Dad! Yam! Trunks yelled, who for some reason still believed that Vegeta and Yam hadn't died, which is understandable too. Deaths by explosion in anime are always very ambiguous. Luckily there was Piccolo, who removed him from doubts with the greatest possible tact. It's useless, Trunks. They have sacrificed themselves to destroy Cell. And it seems that they have succeeded, Mutant Rashi said with some sadness as he looked at some of Cell's remains in the sea. Cell had been destroyed to pieces. It could hardly be distinguished which part was amputated, burned and torn was the one they were observing. Cell had been ripped apart and scattered across the planet with that great blast. We did it. Now we just need Goku to return with the new Kami capable of creating Dragon Balls and we can revive the whole world. And hopefully have a good vacation, said Bulma, who despite thinking so positively and being so relieved she hadn't turned off her barrier yet, this was the safest place in the world and she didn't want to leave it after that apocalyptic event. The threat had ended thanks to the sacrifice of many heroes, Yam and Vegeta. Although it could have been stopped in a simple way if not for the incompetence and / or stupidity of those same heroes, especially Yam and Vegeta. Either way, they could finally have peace again. Or that was the plan. It's not possible, Mutant Rashi and Piccolo shouted, who were the first to realize that something had just happened. Not far from there an immeasurable key was emerging from nowhere. A key that although it seemed impossible to believe grew with every second that passed. An extremely evil key that seemed to be composed of dozens of other keys. Bulma! Run in that direction! Piccolo yelled when he felt that keys is increasing progressively. It was evident what was happening. Even though he seemed abused, Cell had somehow managed to survive and was recovering from his injuries. It's evident from the fact that his ki had gone from being nothing to being at a lower level than before. Although it was increasing, they had to arrive as soon as possible, before it was too late. Ha. I take it back, you have been very helpful. Not only have I verified that I am practically immortal, Cell shouted as he changed his assessment of Vegeta and Yam. For immediately afterwards, Broom. 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 Unleash much of his power, a power so terrifying that made the earth tremble, as did all the survivors. Subrashi. I have also become much stronger. He yelled at Cell with euphoria, having turned his greatest crisis into his greatest blessing. This was the best moment of his short life. He had reached the great cusp behind the cusp. His wettest dream had come true. All was in vain. They all said when verifying that the sacrifice of Vegeta, Yam, Ginger, Ten Shinhan, and Krillin hadn't only been in vain. They had even helped to make that monster stronger. How is it possible? Piccolo said, he didn't understand how he could stay alive after that explosion, much less become stronger. Cell was made up of his regenerating cells and he knew exactly what their limit was. It was impossible to heal from those wounds. Is he really invincible? Fear. A fear like no other seized the hearts of our heroes. A fear that was intensified by Cell's following actions. I know you are listening to me, wherever you are. And surely you are wondering why I am still alive and why I have become more powerful, Cell said with euphoria, with the face of someone who knew that he had already achieved everything in life. And he was casually looking in Bulma's direction. No. It's not possible, it must be a coincidence, said Bulma, more terrified than ever. This couldn't be happening. Was her defensive maneuvering entirely useless too? Were they all going to die? However, Cell outside the sphere was still perpetrating one of the greatest clichés in the world of fiction. Explain everything that had led him to that moment when he believed that he had already won. The answer is quite interesting. I have a certain brain mass that if it is not completely destroyed I can regenerate my body completely from it. And fortunately it was intact after the explosion and as you have been able to witness. He. This is what happened. And as for my increased power, I have the cells of powerful scions in me, so by receiving a wound as deadly as this I have been able to have a Zenkai. So, thank you very much for your sacrifice Vegeta and Yam, you have helped me a lot once again in my mission to achieve perfection. And now, what is he planning to do? Bulma asked rhetorically. She knew what might be planning to do that monster, but she wanted someone to propose another alternative. An alternative that didn't mean plan. Destroy the planet completely, Piccolo said, which was about to collapse. The world that for so many years had been taken care of would be destroyed in front of his eyes helplessly. His Kami part thinks so. I don't know how to find you, but I doubt that you can stay in that barrier forever. And when you go out, hee. You will not have a planet to return to nor oxygen to breathe, Cell thought as he prepared his planet-destroying attack, with which he intended to end everything once and for all. Clan. That attack was being accumulated in his hand. It was only a matter of time before he shot it. And that moment was right now. Fu. Nu. Everyone who could do nothing but hide in the barrier shouted in desperation without even being able to assimilate what was happening. The world had come to an end and they could only stare without doing anything. They couldn't even look. And the worst thing is that once they opened their eyes, the first thing they would see is the infinite nothingness full of chunks of the plant that they couldn't save. It was a nightmare. Nevertheless, they didn't hear a big explosion. They didn't hear the loud bang of a planet exploding. Instead, they heard a somewhat familiar but unfamiliar voice that said, "Very interesting information. Do you want me to help you become stronger too?" What? Hadn't the world ended? Does that mean that someone had stopped that attack? Who had it been? They had to see it, they had to see with their own eyes who that hero is. And when they finally opened their eyes, what they saw? Gohan. That's right, it was Gohan, who at the last second teleported in front of Cell and deflected his hand towards the sky, thus avoiding the destruction of the Earth in the most efficient way possible. A surprising and incredible achievement, especially for someone who wasn't even of legal working age. However, the fact that he now had the ability to teleport and could make triumphal entries saving the day like his father and his teachers did, wasn't the most surprising. The most surprising thing was that her appearance and temperament had changed too much. There was no longer a trace of the poorly drawn little boy. Seriously, look at Kid Gohan's proportions, they don't inspire confidence, debating morality and duty. In his place there was a well-defined teenager with an imposing aura who reviled having great confidence in himself. Woof. He has grown up, said Bulma, that by not being able to age she was even more aware of the passing of age in others. She was impressed, as was everyone. Trunks with 17 years of age, after a year and a half in the time compressor had had a remarkable physical change. He had become taller, muscular and mature. It was easy to see that if one looked at him for more than 5 seconds. However, Gohan, who was only 10 years old, had undergone a complete metamorphosis. Even his adoptive father Piccolo found it hard to believe that he was seeing the same person. He was even worried about how he had grown up so fast. You. Who are you? Another guy that I have no data on like Ginger and Yam? Asked Cell, who was beginning to get annoyed by so many unforeseen events, although on the other hand they were quite entertaining, especially now that he had achieved his final form of it. Finding a surprise like this was like a new free optional DLC after playing the main story. I am Son Gohan. The son of Goku, the one who you were ordered to destroy, Gohan replied with great seriousness, completely forgetting the good manners that his mother had instilled in him even to talk to monsters. Gohan. The last time I saw you a few hours ago you were a dwarf. I understood that children grow a lot at your age, but this seems exaggerated to me, said Cell, who was really surprised by Gohan's great stretch. His now perfect mind had hardly recognized him. I can say the same about you. You have changed a lot in the last hours, but you are still just as disgusting to the eye, Gohan replied, showing once again the hatred he felt towards Cell for all the lives he had selfishly reaped. Including those of his friends, acquaintances and Vegeta. Hee. I'll take it as a compliment, replied Cell, who only had praise for himself and then went on to business. Let me guess. Have you also come so that I can kill you? Or, failing that, to immolate yourself uselessly? But Gohan didn't reply. His silence accompanied by his penetrating gaze said more than any great speech. A silence that didn't bother Cell at all, who would have said the same regardless of what Gohan had answered. I would have preferred to fight your father, but what can he do? I suppose ending you will be my consolation prize before leaving this world behind. So I'm going to enjoy it, son of Goku. I hope you are at least as funny as Vegeta and Yam. And for you to verify that I am not a bully. Hee hee. I'll give you the same advantage that I gave them. I give you a minute of mercy. And that was an offer that Gohan, lover of efficiency thanks to the harsh teachings of Broly, gladly accepted. Are you sure? If so. Kaioken X20. At the same moment, within Bulma's barrier, Piccolo was getting incredibly nervous when he saw what was happening outside the barrier, so much so that he couldn't help but shiver as he wiped the cold sweat that fell on his eyes with his wristbands. This doesn't look good. Bulma, let me out. What? Bulma exclaimed upon hearing this request. You heard me, let me out. Piccolo yelled with more volume and authority than before as he pointed his finger at Gohan, who was taking his time preparing a good first strike. Piccolo, I know you're nervous, but I think you should calm down. Do you really think Gohan would come here to just die? I don't believe it. He must have a plan. Right, Trunks? Mutant Rashi said to reassure Piccolo. He refused to believe that Gohan, someone who had proven so logical this day, would have come here without a successful plan. However, the memory of the Gohan from the future fighting a losing battle against C-17 and C-18 to protect him and later die, failed to awake any optimism from Trunks. I don't know. Don't you see? He is using the Kaioken and hasn't recovered his tail. It is evident that he cannot transform into Super Saiyan or True Saiyan. He has nothing to do against Cell in his base form. If we don't do something, he will also die for nothing. Piccolo yelled with more desperation than before, as if he were a newly mother that saw that her little son was about to fight with a bear. No. We'll wait. Bulma replied, trying to keep her composure despite sharing the same nervousness as everyone else. Mother. Trunks protested upon SE that his young mother was abandoning his little teacher and disciple of her boyfriend in this timeline. You don't have a bad heart, woman. So much being with Broly has made you no longer have decency. Piccolo yelled again in extreme panic, so extreme that he even grabbed Bulma by the lapel of her shirt in a desperate act. However, Bulma didn't flinch or let panic take over her judgment. Instead, she responded with all the logic she could analyze from this situation while pushing Piccolo's hand away. Don't bring Broly into this matter. For the first time, he is not guilty. And no, if I open the barrier, Cell will destroy us. The first 2 times it was because we caught him by surprise, but now he will be waiting for us to appear. But Piccolo replied, still not convinced by this argument, although he was somewhat sorry for having lost his composure. What's more, it is not my life that worries me, but yours. I have my body divided into 3 parts. One is here, another in Kami's palace where I wait for Goku to come with the new Kami, and another has already evacuated with Chi-Chi, his father, my parents, and a body of Gohan. Even if he dies here, he will be able to recover completely by eating a senzu bean and coming back here to fight again. But you can't. Stop making stupid things that put everyone and yourself in danger. Bulma finished off explaining all the reasons why it was irrational to go out there, at the same time expressing her general discontent at almost everyone's performance today. An explanation that made Piccolo's rational part return, but even so his mother's soul kept telling him that he shouldn't let his son suffer. That relieves me, but still, it's useless. He won't be able to change anything. Unfortunately. They could only look and pray to the vacant god that everything would go well. Outside the barrier, Cell was getting impatient. He had been waiting for several seconds for Gohan to hit him at once. However, he was just moving his fist towards his head and making it go back, as if he were calculating the correct distance and power. Come on, what are you waiting for? Hit me. I don't have all day. Finish at once, microbe. The ki I feel in your body is negligible. Even if you hit 1,000,000 times, you wouldn't be able to leave a simple moisture mark. I'll let you hit me. It will be fun to see how your fist breaks due to your own hit, Cell thought, who was analyzing Gohan's energy, speed and power to make sure he wasn't trying to do something strange. Although the most likely thing is that he was trying to make time for his friends to flee. But he didn't care, he would find them sooner or later. Okay, Gohan replied as he once again performed his routine of pushing back and forward his fist. Until he got ready to hit in the same way he had previously rehearsed dozens of times. Yo. However, that fist. It wasn't like the previous ones. His fist was infused with an energy that Cell had never seen. Something that didn't seem from that world. Time seemed to have stopped for him. It was as if his mind had entered a state of hyperactivity that had distorted his perception of time. An abnormal state that only occurs a few times in life. And one of them is when you are about to die. What? What is this? Thought Cell, who felt fear for the first time since he acquired his perfect form. Fear caused by ignorance, fear that existed for having been too arrogant. Fear of an immovable power. Shit. Cell thought as he watched the incarnation of death approach his head. Boom. 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 And that incarnation of death was a single punch whose shock wave had split the planet in two, splitting the clouds, water, and land that dared to be in its path. Not only that, it also spread outside the planet, destroying the small asteroids nearby, that turned into space dust. A punch worthy of a vigilante hero who destroyed evil with a single blow. A punch that even seemed to cause mental damage to those who witnessed it. Goo, ha, NNN. Bulma, Rashi Trunks and Piccolo stuttered, they couldn't believe what had just happened. No one, not even in their wettest and most absurd dreams, could have imagined something like this coming from Gohan. What was that? How is it possible? How can he have so much power without even transforming? Was that boy really Gohan? In the time compression room. A few hours ago, or years, depending on whether one is inside or outside that room. Hello Simba. A voice that echoed between the wide walls of the time compression room. An imposing, venerable, and even majestic voice that was coming from a cloud shaped like Broly's head. Broly-sensei? Gohan asked, very surprised by what he was seeing. Although in the case of Broly anything was possible no matter how absurd it was, so Gohan didn't ask how he was doing that or why. Yes Simba, the Broly cloud answered with more reverberation than before to give more epicism to that great moment. But Gohan still didn't understand anything at all, even though he already had experience with his teacher's nonsense, Broly-sensei. Who the hell is Simba? Aish. Nobody here understands my references. Anyway, hello Gohan, if you can see me it's because you've lost your tail and you've finally reached the Super Saiyan, Broly replied as he materialized his body to speak in a less epic but more practical way. Yes it's true, but why did I need to lose my tail? And where are you? And why do you appear among the clouds? It's more, why are there clouds here? We need you here as soon as possible. Everything is messed up and Bulma is on the verge of a depression, asked Gohan, who really wanted Broly to come back to pick up this mess, the mess they created themselves. I'm sorry, but I'm not the real Broly. I am only a part of his consciousness that he prepared to activate and you meet certain conditions. In this case, become a Super Saiyan. I can only support you morally, give you good advice, teach you valuable lessons and tell dirty jokes, that hyper-realistic simulation of Broly answered, informing Gohan about the bad news. I see. Gohan replied, somewhat disappointed that he wasn't talking to his true sensei, and surely my readers too. As for the tail, the same thing happened to me when I was about your age. Until I lost it, it was impossible for me to transform into Super Saiyan, let's say it hinders the activation of the S cells. But don't worry, there are means to restore it, you will not lose your true Saiyan transformation and in your case you will continue to have the possibility of transforming into Super Saiyan when you recover it. More or less. Said the hyper-realistic simulation of Broly, this time giving good news. I see, it's a relief. But why do you say that in my case it is possible? Gohan asked, who didn't understand why only he had this advantage. And Broly as usual replied in a Socratic way, fortunately for you and everyone, you have an unusual talent since you were a crying dwarf without any combat ability. Don't you remember when your evil uncle kidnapped you? When you got angry you went from having the combat power of 1 unit to more than 1,000. Did you think that's normal? No, the truth is that I still don't explain it. But how does this relate to what I asked you? Gohan answered with another question. It is true that on occasions he had asked himself that question, but at a certain moment he stopped giving it importance. He even thought that it was something normal between hybrids between humans and Saiyans, since he was the only one with this genetic combination. But after meeting Trunks, that power didn't come out spontaneously from nowhere. Since you were born you have had the unusual ability to draw power from your S cells even when you didn't meet the conditions to become a Super Saiyan. You basically borrowed some of the power of a Super Saiyan unconsciously when you were very, very, very angry. This is why I have only taught the true Saiyan transformation to you and didn't help your father to regain his tail. It's because you'd be the only one capable of sustaining both transformations at the same time, except for me of course. I'm the fucking master. Since I have some very incredible mutant S cells, answered Broly, explaining in a more or less scientific way the meaning behind the power-ups of the child Gohan. A scientific explanation about the science that convinced Gohan, who understood the whole context. I get it. You mean that despite transforming into true Saiyan, it will still be possible for me to force my S cells to transform into Super Saiyan at the same time in some way. But. No buts. Let's get to the point, you have things to do. The reason why on the day of the barbecue I implanted that message was to teach you my favorite original technique, of which I am most proud, the most useful and my greatest contribution to the Saiyan race. My Super Broly body multiplication. An ability that only a Super Saiyan is capable of using, said Broly, who was about to transmit to his student his definitive technique. An almost 1,000-year-old anime doesn't have so much history and sacred tradition in all combat shonen. Like when Jiraiya teaches the Rasengan to Naruto. Yes, I know the Rasengan was invented by his father, but you understand me. Super body multiplication. But isn't that what both me and Bulma used to fragment our body? Gohan answered with some doubts and some disappointment when he discovered that super technique that Broly wanted to teach him was something related to a technique that he already know. Like when Jiraiya announced to Naruto that he would teach him to perform the Udama Rasengan, when Kakashi announced that he would teach him the Futon Shuriken Rasengan, or when Killer Bee taught him the Biju Rasengan. Fuck you, Naruto. Get out of your fucking comfort zone and learn something not related with the fucking Rasengan. That is just a simplified version that everyone can use. This ability has a higher phase that only a Super Saiyan is capable of reaching. While the first phase allows you to fragment your body up to 100 parts, dividing in each part its corresponding combat power, the final phase allows you to create permanent clones based on the number of S cells perfectly activated and controlled in your Super Saiyan transformation. Do you know what I mean? Broly explained again in a Socratic way to his student. However, Gohan this time didn't seem to fully understand the "I think so." But, although it wasn't his fault, since he lacked the necessary theoretical knowledge of Saiyan physiology that few knew. Luckily Broly was there to instruct him. No, you don't understand all the implications of this technique. To give you an example. A normal Super Saiyan multiplies your power by 50. Once you have mastered this technique, you can create 50 permanent clones. Problem. Those permanent clones will only have about 50 of your base power at first. Solution. You can train them until they reach their maximum base power again, so you will have 50 equally powerful Gohans with a single mind, and if a Gohan is destroyed you can simply create another one from scratch and train it again until it reaches its maximum base. Plus you can fuse all your bodies into one to create a Gohan 50 times more powerful. Said Broly, who explained all this with a very visual and convincing PowerPoint presentation in which he represented a SWOT of his technique. A presentation that captivated Gohan, although obviously he wasn't completely convinced. Incredible. It's like having 50 more lives. But, yes, this has a small drawback associated. The downside is that by using your S cells to create and maintain those bodies, it will be impossible for you to use those S cells to transform into a Super Saiyan. Although it will still be possible for you to use the rest not used in this technique to transform into a Super Saiyan, even if it is forced, unbalanced and imperfect. Although I don't recommend it, at least in your case, replied Broly, who already knew perfectly well where the criticism could come from. That's a bit. Gohan said, showing a little disappointment. This practically takes away from the grace to be transformed. What's the use of being a Super Saiyan if you can't show the world your cool transformation? And of course, as a good businessman, Broly also had prepared in his PowerPoint what are the brutal advantages of this disadvantage. I know, but this supposed disadvantage also has its advantages. You will not attract attention with your appearance, your mother will not get hysterical, you will not have energy losses derived from activating the transformation, and that your bodies count as if they were in their base form even if they are using the S cell every moment. That means that each of my clones would be able to use the Kaioken X20. Even when I have joined my 50 clones in the same body. This is crazy. Gohan yelled, just thinking about what this meant started to feel dizzy. How could a technique like this exist? Bingo, you begin to understand the greatness of my creation. But that's not all, my young Padawan. This technique also allows you to train automatically and without rest your body's compatibility with S cells just by having your maximum number of active clones. So just by practicing this technique it will become easier for you to activate the rest of the S cells in your body with total harmony and with them create more clones and accumulate more power. In the end, all are advantages if you look at it coldly, right? Okay, yes. You will lose the ability to turn your hair blonde and your eyes green at will. But don't worry, there is hair dye and colored contact lenses, everything has a solution, said Broly as he closed his PowerPoint presentation with great satisfaction, knowing that he had sold his technique with excellent results. Or rather, terrifying results, as Gohan couldn't stop shaking every time he thought about the implications of this ability. Broly-sensei, how many clones is a Saiyan capable of creating with this ability? Asked Gohan, who was finding difficult to breathe and felt like his heart was about to leave his chest. A normal Saiyan can use his S cells to multiply his power by 500 maximum, at least naturally. Therefore, you have room to create 500 clones. You know, for a normal Saiyan to reach a Super Saiyan of multiplier x 500 in a stable way 100% is something extremely complicated. Alternative transformations can be created that reach or approach that level of power, but they are unfortunately faulty transformations. Some of these sacrifice speed for power, Super Saiyan Hulk, while others involve a brutal energy expenditure that greatly shortens the time that the transformation can be sustained, Super Saiyan 3. The key is to maintain a stable and balanced transformation in every aspect, and there is no better way to achieve that stability than my technique. Although I can skip this limitation, because I am the fucking master. I'm awesome, right? Broly said, finishing explaining a little more about Saiyan biology, the theory of the Super Saiyan transformation, and praising his own master technique. Yes. It's amazing, Broly-sensei. It's crazy. If I manage to create 500 clones, I merge them, I use the Koeo-ken X20 and the Kien in the true Saiyan transformation at the same time. I can't imagine how strong I can become. Fortunately, the Saiyans, like everything in this universe, has a limit. If the potential of the S cells were infinite. Yuish. I feel chills just thinking that something like this was possible, Gohan yelled with enthusiasm, although he still felt a certain existential terror thinking about how brutal the technique he is about to learn is. An existential terror that still lingered in his mind for just imagining that there was no theoretical limit to the number of clones that this technique could create. Even though 500 was an amount that shook him even now. HaHaHa, yes. It would be quite disturbing if a Saiyan with S cells with infinite capacity existed and knew this technique. Right? Broly said nonchalantly, as if he was posing an impossible hypothetical scenario. A hypothetical scenario that really terrified Gohan, but that he was unable to get out of his head no matter how hard he tried. Yes. That guy would be able to create clones in an unlimited way as he adapted his S cells, something that supposedly happens automatically and progressively with the use of this technique. And not only that, each of those clones would be able to transform into a Super Saiyan without any limit, since their S cells have no limit either to multiply or to continue transforming into Super Saiyan. A Super Saiyan without a theoretical power limit. Unlimited clones and each one with unlimited power. That guy would be invincible. Right? It is fortunate that something like this doesn't exist and that this is only a theoretical exercise between you and me. Right, Gohan? Broly replied as he tried to contain his craving to laugh like a cliched villain by revealing his incredible, unstoppable, and immoral plan. A more or less subtle hint. But due to the years of student-slash-teacher relationship and the many times he had pronounced the word right, Gohan understood that all his fears related to that ability materialized in one of the less indicated people. Oh. My. God. Gohan muttered as his mind went completely blank from being unable to process and not wanting to process what this meant. He was so freaked out that he couldn't move or think. It was as if time had stopped for him. Clash. Gohan. What are you doing? Stop thinking about stupid things. Besides this, I have other auxiliary techniques to teach you, such as teleportation. I can't let my student need public transportation like an idiot, Broly said, reloading a PowerPoint presentation that included his curriculum. Why yes. Be Broly-sensei. Gohan replied awkwardly, who again rediscovered how fearsome his sensei really is. Outside the flashback. Gohan stared at the horizon, waiting for something to happen. He waited for this to happen. To someone trying to attack Hai by surprise with a powerful attack. A treacherous energy attack from the sky that was rapidly approaching him, which he should not evade. Since doing so, the Earth would be the one who would suffer the impact. Hence. Omega Beam X20. Gohan countered with one of his best attacks. Boom! A powerful attack that perfectly countered the Kamehameha coming towards him, causing both of them to explode. I withdraw what he had said before. You're quite impressive, Cell said as he descended to speak face to face with his greatest enemy to date. Cell, I thought you said you wouldn't move. Have you also retracted that? Gohan said, with some sarcasm as he kept glaring at his predestined enemy. I apologize. I underestimated you. If I hadn't left in time, you would have completely destroyed my entire brain mass and would have been impossible for me to regenerate. Luckily that attack that has left me on the brink of death has made me more powerful again. So thank you, Cell said, not feeling at all embarrassed for having broken his word. I see. I thought that I was imagining things. But you really have become stronger than before. I have to be careful. If I fail many times to kill you, you could become a big problem. And you're already more or less like me at my highest level, Gohan said without sarcasm as he ate a senzu bean to regain his energy. Nom. A comment from Gohan that moderately pleased the proud Cell. I'm glad you understood the situation. If you want. Boom. However, he didn't have the opportunity to finish his sentence, since Gohan took advantage of that moment in which he pretended to pump himself to punch him in the stomach. Something that didn't sit well with Cell, who hated being interrupted and get hit. Bastard! Yelled Cell in fury as he tried to get revenge, killing Gohan with a deadly punch to the head. Phew. But... what? He was unable to hit him. His fist stopped a few inches from Gohan's face, who stood without blinking staring at his first. It was like he knew that punch wasn't going to land. That was a fatal blow, right? Gohan thought as he sarcastically watched Cell's confused expression. Plus. Boom. He gave him another powerful punch, this time in his face, to change Cell's expression in one go. Ugh. Cell complained, whose face was slightly deformed. Which went from confusion to pain. And from pain to anger. Aya! Cell yelled with bloodshot eyes as he prepared to kick Gohan's stomach. However. One more time. Cell thought terrified, as once again his limb stopped a few inches from its target. Boom. But that didn't apply to Gohan, who hit him hard in the solar plexus. Wah! An attack that made Cell almost vomit. It is normal for young children to fight each other over nonsense. But giving mortal blows or with the intention of killing the other is out of question. Is it common sense, did you know? Gohan thought sarcastically as he continued hitting Cell as if he were a punching bag. Palm. Palm. Puum. Zaz. Inside Bulma's space-time barrier. The refugees watched in amazement the evolution of the combat. I cannot believe it. Has Gohan locked Cell in his curse? Piccolo said, excited and terrified once again by the terrifying Kin ability of his adopted son. Curse? What curse? Trunks asked, who had no idea what they were talking about. Nobody had mentioned anything to him about Nen, Kin or other things outside of this universe. Does that mean you have already won? Does it mean that Cell is no longer a threat? Mutant Rashi asked, ignoring Trunks' questions. He was too excited about the idea of winning this war. I'm afraid not. Gohan has used a related ability, but it is not, be a good boy, even though it is something very similar, said Bulma, who also ignored Trunks' questions. She didn't have time to explain the whole background of what was happening. How do you know that? Piccolo asked, who didn't understand how Bulma could know all this. But quickly Bulma answered that question, as it was easy to answer. Gohan's body is in my spaceship, he's telling me about it. I see. Trunks said, who was glad someone finally answered a question. Even if it wasn't his question. Broly told him that he should adapt this technique to direct combat. And the crystallization of that criticism was the ability, fight like good childs, which prevent the intentions to kill in a fight and all mortal blows. This ability is activated by giving a non-fatal blow to his enemy in the head. As long as Gohan doesn't hit it with murderous intentions, Cell will not be able to do it either, Bulma replied, explaining what a body of Gohan had explained to her recently. Amazing. Does that mean that now he can't kill anyone himself? Trunks asked, who more or less understood what they were talking about and tried to ask again. And fortunately his alternative mother solved the doubt this time. No, it only works against Gohan. However, the good news is that he will no longer be able to destroy the planet, as that would imply killing Gohan too. So for the moment we are saved. I see. It's a terrible technique too, Piccolo said, who kept finding this simple and innocent technique equally terrifying. This way Gohan will be able to buy time, exhaust him or make him pass out with a non-fatal blow with which he can later activate his final curse. Incredible combo, said Mutant Rashi, doing a little analysis of this ability and how to take advantage of it. And not only that. Cell is now unable to attack, as he doesn't know why he can't attack like he almost always does. Wit killing intent kill. Especially now that he has recognized Gohan as a threat and he's taunting him every time he can, Piccolo said, expanding on the good analysis of Mutant Rashi. Yes, and Gohan will not be such an idiot as to explain the trick of his ability to make his enemy take countermeasures, said Bulma, who was confident that her boyfriend's disciple wouldn't be such an idiot as to reveal his secret if he didn't have the absolute certainty that it was impossible to fight back. That is always this was the terrible mistake of all shonen fighters, explain to his opponent the secrets of his ability. Outside the barrier. Gohan kept hitting Cell non-stop. Palm. Palm. Plash. Crush high. Something that was infuriating Cell in a way that even he hadn't considered possible. Cell yelled as he tried to attack with his perfect barrier. A deadly ability that destroyed everything in its path as a spherical barrier expanded from his body to the surroundings. An ability with which he intended to push Gohan aside and kill him in the process. But... shit. He was unable to generate the force field. But Gohan was able to hit him in the stomach, which had left him very exposed when trying to perform that attack. Damn bastard. What the hell have you done to me? Why can't I attack you? Cell yelled, totally desperate to understand what the hell was happening to him. That's not normal. It was unprecedented for such a skill to exist. What the hell had happened to the history of this world? Why everyone had become so strong and mysterious? Why Gohan is so powerful now? These were some questions that Gohan seemed willing to answer. Okay. Listen well because I'll only say it once. Or maybe not, since instead of answering his doubts, he punched him in the face when he lowered his guard. A little secret, Gohan said, finishing his sentence. Palm. Palm. Clack. Plash. Crush high. Clack. Plash. Palm. After several seconds the fight between Gohan and Cell continued. Palm. Palm. Clack. Plash. Crush high. Clack. Plash. Palm. Turning into a completely one-way combat in which only Gohan attacked. Or rather, he was the only one allowed to attack. Palm. Palm. Clack. Damn. What the hell is happening? Why can't I crush this brat? Cell thought as he defended himself from Gohan's incessant assault, which kept hitting him over and over again without him being able to counterattack. From time to time, when Gohan would stop for a few tenths of a second to take a breath to hit him again without respite, Cell tried to get revenge for the humiliation. But... flap. Once again his fist was unable to reach Gohan's expressionless face, who seemed to be staring at an inanimate punching bag. Why? Why am I again unable to? Palm. Palm. Clack. Plash. Crush high. And once again Gohan continued with his beating, cutting off that reflection with a punch to the chin. Damn, cried out at Cell helplessly as he defended himself like an armadillo from Gohan's incessant blows. Palm. Palm. Clack. Plash. Crush high. Fall down at once, monster, Gohan thought as he sped up the pace at which he hit Cell. There was no doubt. Gohan was completely dominating combat, if this could even be called combat. No. It was more of a training match against a CPU that was prohibited from attacking player 1. Something that aroused the optimism of the spectators. Optimism that until a few seconds ago did not even exist. He can win. Ha ha ha. Gohan can win. Trunks yelled with great enthusiasm as he saw that his young sensei was achieving what his future self could not achieve. Save the world. Something that filled everyone with joy and hope. Palm. Palm. Clack. Plash. Crush high. Unlike Cell, who was only beaten, bled, vomited blood, writhed in pain, regenerated and was hit again. And above all he cursed the situation in which he found himself while suffering the greatest humiliation of his short life. It was frustrating. It was incomprehensible. It was unacceptable. Get away from me, brat. Cell screamed as he tried to unleash an energy blast around his body to push Gohan away from him. An attack that to everyone's surprise. Boom. Worked? Hey. Why? Why now have I been able to attack? What's going on? Cell thought in amazement as he realized that he hadn't been completely disabled. This is bad, Gohan thought, who flew towards Cell to attack with even more fury than before. Die! Yelled Cell, who pointed his finger at Gohan with the intention of shooting a death beam at his head as he blindly advanced towards him. But... Plaska. Cell was unable to fire Frieza's attack. Instead of him it was Gohan who hit him hard on the head. What? Why before could I and now not? Where is the trick? Cell thought as he tried to perform the attack that was previously successful but not now. However, with much more power. Plash. But once again he was unable to attack, and it was Gohan who was able to take advantage of that opening. Here's something strange. There are attacks that work and others that don't. Why? Cell thought as he used all his neurons to unravel this great mystery and defend himself from Gohan's assault. Meanwhile, inside Bulma's barrier. Oh no. Cell was able to attack. Piccolo yelled with great scaremongering like Mutant Rashi, who was just as worried as he. And this was something that Bulma didn't quite understand. Why are you so alarmed? He's only been lucky once. You don't see it, Gohan has attacked him again in a unidirectional way. Bulma. If he has been able to attack once, he may be able to do it a second time. It has our cells and has shown considerable intelligence. It is possible that he will end up discovering what Gohan's trick is. Mutant Rashi answered by explaining to non-combatants and combatants with little experience the consequences of this tiny setback. Yes, but Gohan has an absolute advantage. He has been hitting him non-stop for more than a minute. Even if he finds out the secret and can start attacking correctly, he'll be in worse shape than Gohan, Trunks said, who agreed with his mother. Gohan was giving him a brutal beating. It was common sense that that was practically impossible. However, after hearing the different arguments, Bulma disagreed with Trunks. No. Piccolo and Rashi are right. This does not look good. Why? Trunks asked as if he were an anime character that only existed to ask questions that served to clarify possible doubts from less intuitive viewers. If Gohan was fighting other bloodthirsty enemy, this strategy might work, but he faces Cell. A guy who can regenerate even after his body explodes, who has unlimited energy, incredible physical stamina, able to survive the vacuum of space, and who can survive even if he is sliced into 1,000 pieces. Gohan cannot win in a battle of resistance against that monster, Piccolo said, cursing that in part his Namekian survival abilities were harming his godson and the world in this way. That's right, Gohan knows. That's why he's giving everything to knock him out as soon as possible, Mutant Rashi said as he watched as Gohan attacked with greater speed than before, without properly managing his energy reserves to have a multi-round combat. It's true. Regardless of Broly's technique, Gohan is using the Kaioken continuously. He does not have infinite senzu beans, and he cannot always have the luxury of eating one in the middle of combat. Especially if Cell starts attacking, Trunks said, beginning to recognize that the situation was worse than he had imagined. That's why we can't assume that Gohan has the upper hand at any point. It's more. Do we even know if this guy can get knocked out? Mutant Rashi said that despite how precarious this situation was, in a certain way he liked being able to share his experience with the youngest. He can be completely regenerated from its core automatically. It would not be unreasonable for him to be biologically incapable of losing consciousness. If I had more information about him I could determine it. Unfortunately Gero did not complete it due to the imminent threat of Broly. So, we are blank. Bulma replied, regretting not having investigated further that project temporarily discarded in her present. That would be the worst scenario of all. Gohan couldn't use his ultimate ability to turn Cell into a harmless puppy. Piccolo replied, who loved and feared that ability at the same time. So his only viable alternative is to pressure Cell until he can completely destroy him with a final attack? Bulma asked to be sure that she had understood the only paths to victory they had left. If Cell is not able to pass out. Yes, that would be the only possibility. But knowing Gohan, he probably won't go for that strategy. Unless he looks totally desperate, Piccolo replied, concerned about the possible decisions that Gohan could make, when he could make them, and if he dared to. Yes. You're right, Trunks said, that apart from Piccolo he was the one who knew Gohan best, despite being another Gohan. That is why he shared part of that concern. In the past he made decisions that put him too much in danger to make sure his friends lived. Would he make a decision like that again? Right now Gohan has the whole world on his shoulders. He has to be completely sure of his success in trying to kill him. If he launches his deadly attack but Cell survives and by regenerating he becomes stronger. Game over. Mutant Rashi said, giving his final verdict on the strategy of killing Cell when he appears to be distracted. But if he continues with the strategy of knocking him out, it's impossible. We're screwed too, Bulma said, expressing in the most subtle way possible that none of the alternatives they had was entirely safe. And that failure in any of those options only meant one thing. The end of the world, and possibly the whole universe. Damn. Gohan, cheer up, Trunks said as he looked with concern and resignation at the legendary combat that was taking place before his eyes. A fight in which he would not be able to do anything except becoming an hindrance like everyone else who was there. While Trunks, Bulma, Mutant Rashi and Piccolo discussed Gohan's chances of victory and defeat, Gohan and Cell continued fighting fiercely. Palm. Palm. Clack. Plash. Crush high. Clack. Plash. Palm. And even though Gohan was still the one with the upper hand in this confrontation. Palm. Palm. Clack. Plash. Cell was starting to get the hang of this strange curse. I see. I don't know exactly how you did it, but the key is not having the intention to kill when attacking, right? Cell asked with arrogance and satisfaction as he continued to dodge, block, receive Gohan's attacks. And for the first time in a long time, hit his enemy. Palm. Palm. Clack. Plash. However, Gohan did not answer anything. He just kept attacking and defending from Cell's attacks as if his enemy hadn't been asked anything. However, that silence did not make Cell angry or uncomfortable. On the contrary, it was the confirmation that his hypothesis was true, something that filled him with pride and satisfaction. I see. You will not answer, but it is not necessary. And if I'm not mistaken, this ability also affects you. You also have to attack without the intention of killing. Palm. Palm. Clack. Plash. And once again Gohan didn't answer, he didn't even change his facial expression. It was as if he didn't care if he had discovered his secret at all, or at the very least as if it didn't affect him. In your first attack you clearly tried to kill me. But in the following ones there was not a hint of murderous intent, unlike each and every one of my attacks. And all those attacks failed for one reason or another. However, the energy blast from before was not intended to kill you, but to drive you away from me. And that did work. Curious, right? Cell said more arrogantly than before as he increased the rate at which he successfully attacked his enemy. Palm. Palm. Clack. Plash. But Gohan still didn't answer. And even though Cell tried not to show it, he was beginning to feel very annoyed at having the sensation of talking to a wall. It's a somewhat strange and annoying ability. Too annoying, just like you. It is incredibly difficult and irritating for me to attack without killing intent, especially you, the biggest annoyance I have encountered so far. But I will take it as a challenge. Palm. Palm. Clack. Plash. And Gohan continued to ignore Cell, as if he only wanted hit Cell and nothing more. And this lack of attention and interest was driving the egocentric green monster crazy, who not only wanted to be heard and answered to, he also wanted to see the reactions of his enemies become bitter due to the possibility of being defeat, and he was not experiencing any of that in this combat, and couldn't stand it. Tell me. What do you plan to do now? Sooner or later I'll get used to this curse and we'll be even. However, I can regenerate myself. I am more resistant than a simple Saiyan like you and my energy is unlimited. My victory is guaranteed at that rate. What will happen when you pass out? Will your curse lose its effect and then could I kill you? What if you were able to defeat me without killing me? Tell me. And with that sudden rage, Cell's power exploded, returning each and every blow that Gohan had given him so far. Pum. 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 A storm of blows that left Gohan very badly injured. Too badly injured, as if he were a shonen eki voyeur who had been caught by an army of powerful and violent women while they were bathing. Gohan! Trunks, Bulma, Rashi, Piccolo shouted in terror when they saw the state in which Gohan had been after that burst of blows and energy. None of those blows had been fatal, but if he didn't heal his wounds, would he be able to continue fighting in that state? It's more. Would he be able to even eat a senzu bean to recover? His hands, his arms, his jaw, his ribs. They were all broken. Is Gohan going to lose? I guess I'll find out soon. Cell said, seeing that all his patience and planning had paid off. He had destroyed Gohan to the point where he was unable to attack, defend himself, and recover. Now he just needed to finish his job by knocking him out. And maybe after that he could kill him in the ways he had been imagining during the beating. However, I'm very afraid that you won't find out in the way you thought, Gohan thought as he looked with the same hatred at Cell as before, but unlike before, a clear mocking smile could be seen on his face despite the fact that his jaw had been shattered. Antithesis. Why, a continuation. Yeah. Cell complained of excruciating pain throughout his entire body, as if he had been brutally beaten in all the limbs. His jaw, his hands, his arms, his ribs. They were all broken. What have you done to me now? What? Cell asked in bewilderment and fear as he regenerated his wounds. Fear of being hurt so badly. Fear of not knowing once more how he had been attacked. But above all, fear to see that Gohan had fully recovered. It was as if he had never been hurt in the first place. What happened to your arrogance from a moment ago, Cell? Are you afraid? Fear of the unknown? Fear of being defeated? Gohan said, asking Cell with the same arrogance and contempt that Cell used with him a few seconds ago. And that was the greatest humiliation Cell had ever felt in his life. Bastard! Answer back! Cell screamed with bloodshot eyes as he advanced towards Gohan to attack him with all his might. But... oh shit! Cell was unable to hold back his urge to kill at that moment, so he was unable to attack Gohan again. Pum! And unlike Gohan, hit him with full strength in the face, destroying part of his decorations. I have nothing to say to scum like you, Gohan said with contempt as he invited him to attack him in a very humiliating way to further enrage the already angry monster. Damn brat! He yelled at Cell with more hatred than before, however he learned from his mistakes and with great difficulty eliminated the killing intent from each of his attacks. Pum! Ah! Pum! Ha! Pum! Ah! Pum! Ha! Pum! Ah! Antithesis. However, those attacks once again disappeared from Gohan's body and instead appeared on Cell's body. Why are you hitting yourself, Cell? Gohan said mockingly as he encouraged Cell to attack him again. Bastard! Cell shouted with more anger than before, but above all doubts and fear, how is it possible? How is it possible that this child is so strong? What is happening? Where did he get these abilities and power from? Once more inside the barrier. Am I imagining things or? Gohan's injuries have been transferred to Cell. Said Trunks, who didn't understand the origin of this ability either, he didn't even have the slightest clue. The Gohan of his future had nothing that even looked similar. Yes. As he is explaining to me, it is one of the last rewards of Broly that he acquired today in the final test. Antithesis, an ability that allows him to reverse something that has already happened between two targets, such as damage inflicted. That means that if Gohan were to be greatly injured while fighting an opponent, he could reverse what occurred between himself and his enemy, simultaneously healing himself while grievously wounding his opponent, said Bulma, who had a direct link with one of Gohan's body, and thanks to that she resolved everyone's doubts. Devils. That ability is very useful, you can tell that Gohan is Broly's favorite. Mutant Rashi said, who despite finding his ability very useful felt great envy of Gohan. That means, if Gohan is not defeated in one blow, is he invincible? Trunks asked, who never wanted to give up his optimism whatever the circumstances, especially if it was about Gohan's survival and victory. Practically. However, if his opponent can heal himself and does not tire, that advantage is not entirely perfect. And there is still the possibility that he can knock him out if he is careless, Piccolo replied, who like him always had to be the pessimist of the group. Although considering everything that had happened to him today, it was the most sensible thing to do. Yes, but things have improved a lot, Trunks answered, who still wanted to dream. Yes, but not enough. We can't relax, this guy has surprised us too many times so far, Mutant Rashi said, trying to keep an attitude between Piccolo's pessimism and Trunks' optimism. Bulma, be on the lookout in case we need to help Gohan at any time, Piccolo said, who couldn't bear the idea of standing here doing nothing. At the very least they had to follow closely in case Gohan needed to be rescued if something went wrong. But Bulma with great enthusiasm replied, I don't think it's necessary. Hey! Why Mom? Trunks asked, who had been left with the responsibility in this chapter to ask the questions so that they would later be answered. The latecomer is here, Bulma replied, creating the last cliffhanger of the Android saga. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.